Welcome, 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 welcome to another Workshop Wednesday. I hope you all can see me. Let me see some fires emojis in the chat if you all can see and hear me clearly. I see some folks pulling up. I love it, love it, love it. And also let us know where you all are tuning in from. Hello, everyone. Hashtag Data Squad. We love that. So excited to see everyone. Amazing, amazing. My name is Chanel Power. I am the founder and CEO of Mentor Me Collective. We are a global technical institute on our way to engineer the infrastructure that it takes to hire the next million global world leaders in tech. And so we're super excited to be here and to be joined by the amazing individuals from Girls Who ML. So shout out to Girls Who ML. Thanks so much for partnering with us to bring this incredible series to life. We're super, super excited. Today, we have an incredible workshop host. It will not be me. We have some new faces joining us, so we're super excited. And before we get started, though, I want to make sure that everyone is in the room. So tell Lottie Dottie and everybody that we are live. We are live on actually LinkedIn Live and also on YouTube. So feel free to have us here. Of course, I see the fire emojis already coming through. We're super excited about this. As you all know, so many things are happening in the AI landscape. AI, machine learning, just all things are moving super fast. And so I think it's so important for us to have conversations like these because humans are still at the center of every deployment decision that is made. And sometimes in tech, we get so focused on whether something can work or if we say, hey, like, if it doesn't work, or if the impact is not positive, who exactly is going to be affected by this? So that is why I'm super excited for today's session. What no one tells you about deploying AI to people in crisis. So joining us today is Catherine Reeder. We're super excited to have her. She is a product development leader with over 5+ years of experience in deploying products, applying, including AI systems within public services. She's delivered keynote speeches at G7 events, advised organizations on innovation in regulated environments, and brings a wide perspective that I think every builder, every founder, every engineer, and of course, product leader needs right now. So please help me to give a warm welcome to the most amazing Catherine.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
And you may not have mentioned, but you can probably hear it in my voice. I'm in England, so lovely to be here.
We're super excited to have you. Shout out to those who are in the UK. If you're in the UK, definitely throw a flag emoji in the chat, in the chat. All right. So, Catherine, before we get started, I definitely wanted to dive in and maybe ask you something fun. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. If AI had to do one human thing perfectly before we even trusted it more, which of these would you choose? A, parallel parking. B, a group chat communication. C, maybe explaining per your last email energy. Or D, knowing when someone says, I'm fine, that they're absolutely not fine.
I think for me, like I can do all of those things except parallel park. So I'm definitely going to say parallel parking. I need to level up on that one.
I love that so much. Shout out to the parallel parkers. I think we were talking earlier about being in New York, and I feel like that is like definitely a super skill that you need to have and learn. So I had to learn by fire and by force. But anywho, again, we're super excited to have you. We're going to go ahead and bring up your slides, and then over to you.
Amazing. So thank you so much, everybody, for having me. And I just want to kind of talk about a brief story that made me want to do a workshop like this. And it's that recently I was like, I want to get more into AI. I don't know, I don't feel I know enough about it. And I was applying for loads of different fellowships, especially ones in the UK, but around the world, all about AI safety. But the thing that I kept coming across is they'd be like, okay, which AI risk are you looking at? Is it that AI robots take over the world and completely dominate us? Is it that AI kind of completely fries the environment? Is it that, you know, we lose all ability to think? And I was like, oh, it's just that people are being harmed by AI in the way that they're harmed by other tech. You know, it's things like people using it to hurt each other, or people using it to hurt themselves, that kind of thing. And time and time again, I'd kind of get this feedback of like, no, it needs to be these big existential risks that, you know, you need to be looking at for this particular program. And it was really disconnected to not only my lived experience, which is of experiencing harms online, but also my professional experience of being that one in the decision-making seat around AI. I'm not thinking about, okay, is it going to bring down the whole of humanity right now? I'm thinking about, is this actually going to really hurt one of my end users? And so I sit here today to try and bring the conversation back to some of the really difficult questions that we're having to ask in the here and now. There's definitely a place for those big questions, but I've certainly really struggled to find conversations that just talk about the honest and really difficult decisions that people have to make right now about AI. And so I want you to kind of know in the next kind of 40 minutes how to make difficult decisions when you're the one calling the shots on the safety of the AI products that you are working on. And even if you don't work on one yet, I'm going to kind of talk through why I still think that this topic is really useful for you. I hope that you feel empowered to take practical steps to achieve safety, but also other values that you might want to bring out in a product that you are working on. And it's so that by the end of this workshop, you can show employers that you can not only technically deliver results, but you can actually make these results fit for the real world. And I think that is such a underrated skill when it comes to lots of learning and development spaces, but actually it's something massive that employers are looking for, and you really need it when you're in that decision-making seat. So yeah, on with the talk. And just to say that this is a collaboration between GirlsWhoML, who are championing gender diversity and machine learning and AI. And there's kind of a series every Wednesday at the moment in this collaboration with Mental Me Collective. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for the next one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about me. You already know my name, which is Catherine. You know that I'm in England. And for 5 years, I've been leading tech teams in public services. I started out on a grad scheme in the UK. We have a free national health service, and I worked on that before moving to working for charities. And so I've had to sit on and manage products where people are really struggling and really needing help. And in those teams, I was a product manager, which meant that I kind of was in a team with software engineers, researchers, designers, all those amazing people. And I was the one setting the vision for the team and making sure that what we made was successful, making sure that it had key performance indicators tied to it, making sure that our stakeholders were a fan, tying in our user insight, all of that good stuff. And I've also, this might be useful to know, that I've also sat on interview panels for software engineers, and I've line managed and coached junior product colleagues. It's something that I'm really passionate about, because in the space of 3 years, I went from leaving university on a grad scheme, I think it was 3 and a bit years, to being a senior product manager, which is amazing. And I want to offer more people the chance to do that. I think young and emerging talent offers a perspective that is just completely fresh, and that someone who's maybe coming to it from a different profession might not have. So yeah, I'm always really passionate about uplifting people, and that's kind of brought me to this talk and running it today. In terms of personal experience, so this is a massive part of what I take to work, and it's I got my first smartphone and social media at 13, and I have experienced a lot of online harm that came with that. And I was kind of saying to Chanel before we started that I went through a lot of my years growing up thinking that it was my fault and that I'd done something wrong. But when I started working in tech, I realized that actually these platforms that I was on were not made safe by design. And I realized that my generation deserved better tech. So one of my personal values is safety, and I really care about it. But that doesn't mean that it's easy to make that happen in practice. And so that's what we're going to be talking through today, and how you can just translate caring about something and thinking it's really good into it actually being in your end product. I should say as well that one of the topics that we're going to touch on in this talk is just people who are in crisis and might present a risk to themselves, not in any graphic detail. We're going to discuss that, but just kind of a content warning for that. Okay, so imagine this. You have managed to get yourself a job interview. It may be at the place you currently work at. It may be for a completely new job. And you are asked how to make sure a new AI feature is safe, or that it's inclusive, or that it's working towards the mission. How do you make sure that the end thing that you have control over actually works towards these big, massive, pretty intangible things? And I've been that person in interview panels asking that question to people who can tell me really quickly about how they would deploy a certain pipeline, or how they'd make sure that their code is really clean. But I'm saying, no, what's the real world problem solving skills that you would use here? Because they are absolutely vital for being able to work in a tech team. And I'm going to kind of show you some of the techniques that you can use both to answer this question, but also hopefully one day make products that actually work for society. So to get started, I want you to picture a digital product. You could think about a digital product that you own because you already own one, or something that you've made, or it could be something that you use a lot, like a app you use to buy bus tickets, or go to the gym, that kind of thing. And you have been tasked with creating a new AI feature for it. And I want you to think about what's the worst thing that could go wrong. And you can think about it in your head. You can enter it into the chat if you want. But what is the absolute worst thing that could go wrong with a new AI feature that you are creating? Just the first thing. So it could be that it falls over. It could be that it doesn't meet people's needs. Yeah, someone's put, it could be used about intentions it wasn't meant for. It creates a new attack vector. Dual use risk. It could be biased. Absolutely. 100%. Information leakage. And there's so many different answers that are coming in. Oh, there's loads of answers. People going out of control, data privacy, not inclusive. Okay, so as we can see, there's loads of different ways that it might not work out. And how do you manage all that when you're the person who's responsible for all these decisions? How do you manage that there's millions of things running through your mind about what might not work about it? And you are now in an interview having to answer that question. And I asked this question because it was a question that I had to ask myself when I was creating a product. So to give you some context, I was working on a public-facing website for something that delivered public services to people who, for example, might struggle with housing or money. And I was creating a chatbot, and I could see a problem that AI might be able to help us fix, in that a lot of people were getting directed through to the wrong services. And I created a chatbot that asked the open question of, what would you like help with today? And the user would put in what they would want help with. And the bot that myself and the team created would be able to detect what topic someone wanted to talk about, and we could direct them to the right service. And it seems simple enough, right? So the scenario on the screen, I've started my chat. The bot's asked me, what would I like help with today? I've said, I can't pay my energy bill. Can you help me? It can be really stressful for a person in that situation. They don't want to be directed through to the wrong service. And the bot goes, here's some advice on welfare that you can claim for energy bills. Perfect. That might direct them to some content that might help. And then if they're still struggling, it might direct them through to an actual person that can help them. And it seems really simple enough. And then you start to think about all the different things that people have been putting in the chat about, like misuse, data leaks, lack of inclusivity, bias. And when you're responsible for getting something put out there fast, and you've got all those different things competing in your head about, like, well, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, it can be paralyzing. And ultimately, there can be times where you struggle to deal with it. And I'm going to show you what did happen when we went live with this product, which was that I got a message from a colleague a few weeks into going live saying that someone had contacted us expressing that they weren't safe. I think that they'd given us some details about getting help to them and said, can you send help? And our bot wasn't trained to understand what that person was saying. And I think there wasn't actually anybody available to talk to them anyway. So they kind of saw this message where, when they put in a message like, I don't feel safe right now, can you send help? The message that they were getting was, I don't understand what you're saying. We can't put you through to anyone. Goodbye. And for me, that was a really difficult moment, I'll admit, because I've been in situations very similar to that user, and I want to keep my users safe. And in that moment, I felt like I hadn't done that. I hadn't given that user that clear direction as to who could help them. Okay, if we couldn't help them, at least we could direct them and be very clear with them that we can't help them right now. Someone else can. And so I'm going to talk through the steps that now I've learned would have helped me to have recognized this and prevent this scenario from happening. And the first one is this, and I've not necessarily seen, I don't think any of the messages quite framed it in the chat, and it's tie the work that you're doing back to the worst case scenario for your users. So think about it exactly from their perspective. How would that work? And okay, there might be many different worst case scenarios, but if you think about it from the mind of, this is someone using your product, how would that actually look? And to really help do that, to frame worst case and ground it in a real user's perspective, there's this kind of framework that you can use, which is called if, then, and resulting in. And it basically isolates a scenario and says, if a user, does this, presents with something like that, then our system does this, and it results in a real world outcome for someone. And when you have all those different things going through your head, like, for example, we've got things around information leakage, can lack inclusivity, human to human misuse, personal data leak, vulnerability. Yes, absolutely. But they're all really massive things. So if you can frame it around, okay, what does this actually look like in practice? It's not just an abstract word anymore. It's an actual scenario that we have to deal with. Thinking about it before you go live, before that scenario becomes a real thing, is absolutely massive. And so it also quantifies kind of what would happen if the worst happened. Because at the moment, you've got a long, we've got in the chat a very long list of all the stuff that could go wrong. And you need to be able to prioritize it, because you can't stop absolutely everything from going wrong. You need to be able to prioritize exactly what it is that you're going to proactively stop happening. And that's when the resulting in comes into place, and you can quantify, real world, this is a really difficult and horrible thing that is going to happen if this takes place. And that can help you make those really hard decisions about, okay, this is the most important thing. Because having worked in nonprofit and in government, we all want to do good, but what does good actually look like? What, when we have to make so many different decisions about, okay, well, we need to do this thing to make it good, this thing to make it good, what are the really difficult real world implications of us not doing good, and what's the least bad thing that we can kind of live with for now, is something that really helps me with decision making. And so in this scenario, I've kind of written it out. And like, you also might want to do this with some of these scenarios that you gave, but if a user in immediate danger uses our chat, then they could mistakenly give information to our chat, believing it can get them immediate help. And this could result in us being liable for the harm that a user faces. They might not have gone on to get help from anywhere else, and they might have come to harm as a result. And our organization might be, for example, financially liable, like loads of different things. And having that, working through that whilst you're building out your product, like I say, it's a prioritization tool, but it also helps you flag to the people around you about the real issues that you're dealing with and the help that you might need, because some of these things might be absolutely massive. Some of these trade-offs that you're making, where you're saying this one's tolerable but this one's not, or actually, like, we can't prevent any of these happening and go live within this time frame. You need to be able to articulate to people what is the real world consequence of that happening. So having that if then when, or if then resulting in framework, kind of grounds it in real world scenarios to get people asking those difficult questions about, what is it going to be? Are we going to prioritize safety and stop this scenario from happening, or are we going to prioritize time and accept the risk that this exact scenario might happen? And I would say as well, like, it might seem tedious, and I think there's definitely an inclination to not think about the really difficult things. You don't really want to think about them, but it's much nicer to think about them now than it is to think about it when it's too late. So this is a really useful tool to use to communicate to people and quantify kind of what is worst case, to bring it to life, to get that shared understanding of what it is. The second one is to make it a team problem. I think, especially in interviews, there's always a tendency to say, like, oh yeah, well, if I was responsible for, making a product safe, then I would do this and I would do that. but there's only so much that you can achieve as an individual in making a whole product safe. You're probably going to be working as part of a team, and if no one else in the team is working to achieve this, then what's the point? All of their work could kind of undermine you in so many different ways. So yeah, it's definitely worth making it a team problem. And I also say this because the scenario that I came across, the example that I gave, was one that I had thought about, but I had never brought it to the team. And this kind of brings me on to, how do we actually make it a team problem? Ask yourself, can you actually talk with your team about this? So I was sat having conversations at my kitchen table with my housemates about like, oh, I'm really interested in making sure this scenario doesn't happen. And yeah, I didn't have those conversations at work. There were kind of various reasons as to why I didn't. And yeah, if you can't, then there's a big risk that it sits in your head, and that individual responsibility you have is never going to translate into the end product that you are making. If you can talk to your team about it, great. Document risks in the format that we just talked about, and also the mitigations that you might have in place to stop some of those things happening. That's brilliant. You can get a shared understanding. If sometimes, find somewhere where it's safe to kind of figure out what you can talk about. But if no, get outside support. That in and of itself is a warning sign. Some of the messages in the chat talked about risks, and they talked about bias. Talking about bias can be sometimes really hard, especially if you're actually facing it in the workplace. The scenario that I had was talking about mental health. That can be also really difficult to talk about in the workplace. We're all human at the end of the day. And so you need to think about the dynamics of your team, and actually, can you talk to anybody about this? And if you can't, you need to get help. And that can be going to someone like a mentor. It can be going to leadership, a line manager, maybe someone who works in a similar team somewhere else. And kind of, I think sharing a problem can massively help you work through it, but also if they're someone who can help you kind of create those safe spaces in your team, that's absolutely massive. But yeah, some of the issues, the real world issues that come out around AI safety are incredibly sensitive and hard to talk about. So definitely ask yourself, can you talk to your team about it? If you can't and you're carrying it on your own, it's going to be really difficult to champion safety. And related to that point is step 3, and that's all about creating accountability. So I was someone who was one of the people responsible for signing off the product that I talked about, but I was someone who was responsible for signing off that it went live on time, that the operations team were ready for it, that it met data privacy standards, that it met cybersecurity standards. Like, there was so many things I was responsible for signing it off on, that when it was just me in my head saying, what about that safety thing that you were thinking about? There wasn't anybody else in the team talking about it because I didn't raise it with the team. And there wasn't anybody saying to me like, yeah, but what about specifically about safety? And I wish there had been to hold me to account. And you might be thinking, oh no, well, I'm someone who'd always, I'd always think about that. But we have to be realistic. Again, we're humans, and when there's so many conflicting pressures, the real thing that you can do to demonstrate that you are a team player, that you can pragmatically problem solve, is to create the infrastructure for everybody to be making these decisions time and time again. And so ultimately, the question that you have to ask, and you might want to ask this about the product that you made up, You might not know the answer to this, but who is ultimately responsible for this product being safe? And name a person. A role on a Notion page is not a person. It needs to be a real person that you can point to, a name that you can put down, that can sign things off, and that when you're putting something live can be that final person to say, yep, that's good enough, or actually, no, this is kind of rubbish. And it could be that person who's also juggling loads of different things, or someone else, but it has to just be that intentional thing of this person said that this is safe enough. And I guess if you're struggling to think about who that might be, think about, if it did go wrong, if you have one of those scenarios that we talked about that did go wrong, who would be that person who got that message? So for me, it was me getting that Slack message saying like, oh, Catherine, we've had this happen. Who would that message probably go to? And that's probably the person that you want to sign off on safety, because they're the person who's going to be dealing with it. And as much as you might be like, oh, like another thing to take on, it's much better that you take it on intentionally now than that it gets given to you in a crisis and you're like, wait, that's me. Creating accountability so that you have those really intentional decision points where you are focused specifically on safety. I'm going to kind of recap the main points in a minute, but just to say, good can be possible. I've talked a lot about like what I've learned from creating something where maybe safety was not always up to a standard that I wish it had been. But what actually happened next, I think, is also super important to point out. So I had to act quite quickly, and I had set up our product to be something that could be iterated really fast, which is also another thing that can really help with championing safety, that once you put something out there into the world, if you can change it very fast, that really helps. And I thought about that exact scenario where someone contacts us and there's no one available and we could be liable for the harm that they face. Walking through that scenario with the team helped us prioritize what our first step was going to be to making this a safer product. There were lots of different ideas, but I created an intervention where when the bot asked the user, what would you like to talk about today? And the user said, I don't feel safe now. Can you send help? The first thing that the bot would do is say that it sounds like you might be in danger. If you need immediate help, to say, stay safe, end the chat and call the emergency number in the UK, which is 999. And that's because if someone is in immediate danger, our service could never help them get immediate help. It's not that kind of service. We only have one service for that in the UK, and that's 999. And so that was my priority, was to stop us being liable for the harm that our end users would face, and illustrating that risk to everybody in that team through that if then resulting in framework allowed me to align the team incredibly quickly on what would change. But another thing that I set up afterwards was I was like, okay, I don't want to make decisions that result in things like this again. So I'm going to create some infrastructure that changes things. And the thing that I did is create kind of an AI playbook where I suggested in it that anytime we have a new release on this AI functionality, that we have a designated person who signs off on, is this safe enough? And so, that was something that was incredibly important to me, because I'm saying all this about a particular example, but if you can demonstrate to employers that you're someone who really cares about making these decisions time and time again. You'll think about the infrastructure you can put in place. You'll think about things like, how can I make sure I'm setting out risks on like if then resulting in time and time again. So I think for me, it's about, yes, they are really practical steps to carry out, but also think about how can you repeat them time and time again. And to kind of bring the talk part of this to a close, the 3 things to walk into a room with, and that might be a room that you're having a job interview in, or this might be a room where you're making really tough decisions about AI safety, is surface what could go wrong for users and really walk through that scenario and what the impact of it is. And 2 is to get outside support if the team can't talk about it. So if you write down that risk, you need to get your whole team on board with it. And if you can't do that, this is a tough job. You cannot do it alone and you need to get help. And finally, find someone to sign off that the product itself is safe enough to go live with. It creates some accountability and responsibility and really focuses minds. It means that if you have a whole team that are working to make sure that a person says, yes, this is safe enough, a real vocal point where people can be like, okay, Catherine over there, I really need to make sure that she says yes to this on the grounds of safety. And so they are 3 things that turn basically having good intentions into actual practice of a product. And then when it comes to what that shows to employers that you might want to be trying to impress, is that it shows them that you don't just have the knowledge, but that you can do something actually practical with it. And hopefully it results in all of us having digital products that actually work for us in future. That's the long-term thing when we're all in, tech jobs that we really want. Hopefully it gets us to that point where we're also, as consumers, really happy with the products that we're using and we feel really safe using them. And yeah, that's me. I'm Catherine. I've got there my LinkedIn QR code, so feel free to follow me, or if you want to message me, you can also connect with me. I am currently doing freelance and contract stuff, so I'm currently open to product management contracts. I'm doing public speaking like this. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm also advising on bridging the gap between tech policy and products. I'm currently doing some work with an amazing UK nonprofit called FlipGen, who have a Gen Z-led team doing all things tech accountability and digital well-being. And yeah, that is me. Thank you so much. And I think we have some questions.
We sure do. Thank you so much, Catherine. This was so amazing. I love how you just broke down the concept of like, what does it look like to ask for help? What does it look like to identify scenarios beforehand that may be harmful to end users? And of course, what does that look? What does that advocacy path look like in that journey? So I see a lot of love in the chat. Super excited. Thanks, Catherine. And yeah, we're going to jump into some Q&A. So for those of you who already dropped some questions, I did take some time to store them. But if you have other questions that come up as we have this wonderful conversation, please feel free to drop them and we'll be able to bring them on stage. So here's our first question from earlier today. So at Catherine, is this a software life cycle approach or a unit test approach just to fix anything that may be broken before publishing or maybe deploying? I think that's what we were talking about.
I think that's such a good question. So essentially, as well, if you're less techie here, it essentially refers to, do you test a whole product for this, or is it a very isolated piece of functionality that you test when you're testing for safety? And I think it depends on what your releasing. And I think if you are releasing something that you feel really uncertain about, that kind of end impact, or that you feel that it might be really wide reaching, I think even if it is a small feature change and you normally do like a unit test on it or something, I think it's worth looking at that whole picture, because essentially it is, you need to go back to that user's shoes, and they are not experiencing it as an isolated feature, they're experiencing it as a whole user journey. And so another change that we made that I haven't mentioned here is that one of the changes we made was to make it very clear to people when they started that they were talking to a bot and not a human, and they might not necessarily get connected through to a bot. But when we were thinking about the impact it had on safety, we needed to pair that with the additional safety messaging that had been put in place as well. So I think it comes down to, if you feel like when you're sketching out those scenarios, it's what's going to happen. If you feel like it's going to have an impact on a user's journey as a whole, I think it's worth kind of taking this approach and teasing out those difficult questions. If you feel highly confident that the feature change you're making is not going to make a change to the user's experience of the whole journey, then I'd say maybe just keep testing limited to that.
I think that's a really great question. Also, wonderful insights on how I guess you can vary, or how do you say? I love the approach that you basically gave. So I appreciate that. Next question. Um, this is from Selma. So, how can we get outside support if we are working in a company? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, I would say it really depends on the structure of the company, how big it is. I've worked in quite big organizations, so usually I find the best sources of support are in people who are in teams that are adjacent to mine. So they're not the same team, but they might be working through some of the same really difficult problems. But it might also be that you have things like a staff network where you might have um, people who have the same identity as you and things, and that can be, for a lot of people that is a really safe space. It can be that your profession has kind of development sessions and kind of communities of practice that you can go to. I think if you're not sure where that space is, I would recommend saying, like, maybe you should be the person to create that space where people can get outside of their day-to-day teams, which I think is massive, because I think if you're in a team, the culture of it, the mindset of it can have such an influence on everything and what you feel comfortable talking about and working on. If you can create a space where people can come from their day-to-day teams and bring problems in a new light, that is massive. And if you can do that, you are not only creating that place for you to be able to keep making those decisions about safety, but you're creating it for a whole organization to do that, and you're massively increasing your scale. So it's not easy, but if you can't find that space, I'd recommend trying to create it somewhere. And if you're in an organization that is really unsupportive, I'd say trying to find even local tech meetups. I usually find that people love to talk about the problems that they're working on at the moment and the things they find really difficult, and you can get into really in-depth conversations fast. So if you can't find it within your organization, trying to leverage your networks. People love talking about problems. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that answer as well. Another question. So, Catherine, you mentioned that I guess earlier you asked. Oh, this is for I guess you asked this similar questions during interviews. If the applicant explains all of this information, will there be more? Will there be a time limit? If not,
Would I expect someone to deliver a 40-minute presentation in response to an interview question? Absolutely not. I think the point I really like, if you had to boil it down to, let's say, a 5-10 minute interview answer, is that you stress your team working credentials. You don't just take it on as an individual problem. You also think about the very hard actions you're going to take to ensure it. So, I'm going to get a person to sign it off. You're not just saying like, oh, we'll try and do this, we'll try and do that. You're leveraging it around a particular action point. And when it comes to how you talk about these problems, you frame it around the end user. So I think you can totally boil it down into a 5-10 minute response. It's great if you have an example with all of these things. I think there's so much theory around AI safety, but if you can find an opportunity to try this out, even if it's a product you make yourself, just getting into that mindset, that headspace, and trying it out is great. But yeah, there are ways that you can boil it down. I think it's just in terms of those key kind of steps around frame your problem around your user, create a really strong action to take and approach it, show that you are a team worker when you're answering that question.
amazing. Another question: how much can we trust AI's ability on decision making for critical business use cases or use case scenarios, as we cannot trust business data to be used via AI? Hmm.
Ooh, I feel like this is like an absolutely massive question. So I'm trying to think about the best way to break it down. How can we trust AI's ability on decision making for critical business use case scenario, as we cannot trust business data be used? Oh, so I guess in this particular scenario, like, how can we trust that, someone was in a critical position? How can we trust that AI would have made the right decision? I think it's about those fallbacks. So in this scenario where I carefully scoped AI to be in the actual decision making that AI was doing in this scenario was deciding which service a person would be directed to. And the services themselves, the people, like, if you weren't put through to the right service and there was a person at the end of it, they could direct you back to another service. And if the bot didn't understand you, they'd ask you a multiple choice question instead. But it was all directing someone to somewhere within the organization. And the data that we were ingesting would only stay within our organization. So what I didn't talk about in this presentation is that I'd also already made a lot of decisions about where we were going to use AI. And in this chatbot, I started out with using it at this one very particular point, because even though I hadn't worked through that kind of end client scenario of a client being in danger, I knew that this was an isolated point in the journey where there were limited outcomes a user could get. And other than directing them off to 999, we would be keeping them inside the organization and we could push them from service to service later down the line. So I think for me, it's about when you're starting with exploring where AI could be used, and you're figuring things out, is isolating a really particular point where you have a very clear understanding of what are the different journeys going to look like. And that way you can test and learn very fast and you can build up trust, because you start out with something that you know what success looks like, and you learn, there's additional things that you hadn't thought about, like in this scenario, you iterate on them fast. And yeah, the key in this scenario that set me up really well was creating a very isolated point in the journey to use this that had a very clear journey. So that's how you kind of build up trust with yourself as a team, with AI, but also with stakeholders and with users as well.
That was powerful. So yeah, Avantika, I hope that also answered your question. Another question: if AGI comes, do you think AI safety will change to incorporate the safety of an AI itself?
If AGI comes, do you think AI safety will change to incorporate the safety of AI itself? Oh, I think I might not be right, but this might be referring to like some of like the ways in which an AI feels safe. I don't know, Chanel, what do you think of this? Like, what? I don't think I'm quite sure what the question is referring to.
To be honest, I'm also aligned. I'm not too sure. Dennis, can you re-comment your question and just kind of explain what you mean a little bit further? That would be super helpful. So we'll come back to you. Denise has a question: how to approach this if you are a solo developer architecting AI?
Mm, I think that's great question, because you don't have a team then, and in some ways it makes it easier, in some ways it makes it harder. It is, if we come back to these different steps, you can still certainly walk through what you think the problems that your users might face are. I'd recommend finding some users, and maybe like that would give you better insight as to what some of the risks might be. And if you're particularly close to those users, you could ask them to walk through those risks with you. I think when it comes to, can you talk about it? I mean, if you can write out those risks, you can talk about it with yourself, which is something. And when it comes to creating that accountability, I think it's just being incredibly clear with yourself what your criteria for good enough is. And so ultimately, when we're talking about assigning someone with the responsibility to say this is safe enough, it's because we really want to force someone to think long and hard about what does that look like, and to sit with that and feel okay with that. And if that is you, I think it's just documenting it and making sure that you hold true to that. So I think in some ways it's easier if you're on your own, you've got that intent, because you can set your priorities and you can put safety at the heart of things. It's when everybody else starts coming in and bringing up so much stuff that it can be harder. But I'd always recommend, whatever you do with AI and products, is kind of where you can get your end users involved as well.
Awesome. We have another question: can you employ an AI agent to do this? I guess to be compliance officer.
Yeah. Can you employ an AI agent to do this? Well, I'd be biased and say no, because I'd be out of a job. But I guess I'd also say I think we as humans bring a lot of expertise that comes with us experiencing things firsthand. And I think if you have a great, diverse team, they'll be able to identify different scenarios that aren't safe, that maybe aren't as well represented on the internet, or that models haven't been trained on as much. So, for example, our the particular chatbot that I was talking about, it's quite likely that it could face people getting in touch with us, having to talk in quite discreet and bizarre ways about domestic abuse and stuff. And I was encouraging my team to constantly be looking at the data and using that to train the model again and again. And we did think about, do we use AI to classify all that data and train it? But that was a risk for us. I think always start human. There are some patterns that AI is not going to detect. And safety is such a complicated and nuanced topic, depending on who you are, the safety risks that you might face can be massively different and complex. So I'd always advocate for starting with humans first. And if something feels repeatable and not that nuanced, then maybe consider ways that you can get AI more involved in it. But I think, yeah, as a starting point, start with humans before asking that question.
Yeah, great question and an incredible answer. We have room for two more questions. This is one of the second or one of the two. Catherine, which blind spot in your AI feels small today but could become your biggest safety issue 6 months from now?
Ooh, this is such an amazing question. And I will say that this particular product is not one that I work on anymore, although I still go on the website and play around with it and see what the team has done since. I would say biggest safety issue 6 months from now. That is a really tricky one. What is the biggest issue? That is definitely making me think a bit. I think this is actually a really weird one that I'm going to say, is that I almost think one of the biggest AI safety issues, and it's not really for me as a product owner, but it was for our end users, was that if we didn't have an advisor available to staff the chat, we would just say like, oh, there's no one available, you can have a look at our website. And ultimately, I think people were really looking for tailored advice to their situation. And I think it's more likely than not that they, rather than looking at the website, which we'd had feedback was kind of sometimes not personalized enough, I think they'd probably go to another large AI provider and probably directly ask something like ChatGPT for advice. And a lot of the advice we give is like, it's regulated, it's very complex and difficult and hard to understand. And so I think almost one of the biggest risks that our AI posed is not keeping up with the public's needs, wants, expectations. So they're driven to a place that has a lower standard of offering, and they're forced to take that over what we have. And as a result, especially as we see things like ChatGPT having adverts now and everything, we might see people doing things that are actually, misleading or to the detriment of them. So I think some of the biggest AI issues, safety issues facing our users actually came from where our product wasn't using AI, because one of the roadmap features that I defined was for the chatbot to start coming back with personalized advice sourced from the website, and kind of keep that back and forth going rather than cutting someone off completely. So, and then the risk that posed, to a user is that they come to detriment as a result of following that advice. I guess the only other thing I'd say is that an organization issue to solve? I don't know, but it's certainly something that would have been or still is facing our users.
Amazing, Helen. I hope that answers your question. And the last question will be from Dennis again. So he came back and provided more context. So, if AI becomes intelligent like a human, I think if maybe AI algorithms become more intelligent, do you think we should care about their safety, and build tools and processes to make sure that these algorithms are safe as they interact with humans?
I think when it comes to like cyber security safety and data security safety, like, yes. When it comes to when I think of safety, I think of kind of preserving kind of right to life and to human rights. And in my mind, that doesn't cover AI because it's not a human. So I think security is something that we should care about. Safety, in my mind, and whether it's right or not, like, we're often protected by like human rights acts and treaties, and AI isn't. So I think for now that's my guiding star, and it should just be AI security, human safety.
I love that. Well, everyone, that wraps up our workshop Wednesday for today. We're super excited and thankful to have had you, Catherine. Before we hop off, is there anything that you love to share? Any links, or even maybe some final words?
Yeah, I think I would just say that there is so much theory out there around AI safety, and I appreciate I've probably given you a lot of theory over the past hour, but actually getting that practical hands-on experience is absolutely massive. So if you can get that, and that can be even through something you create, as someone said earlier, as a sole developer, if you can get that, that gives you so much more expertise in AI safety than reading a million PDFs ever will. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks again, Catherine. Thanks again, Girls Who ML, for allowing us to share this space with you. For those of you who did not do so, just want to bring this back on stage. Please feel free to leverage this QR code to connect with Catherine. She's open to various opportunities, public speaking, other project management contracts, and of course, continuing to bridge the gap between tech policy and products. Again, we'll be back next week, same time, same place. And we look forward to seeing you all. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Think I've been here before. I know that I must have met you in a past life.